Go till the fifth launch of the American space shuttle. The countdown is well underway, and if there are no last-minute problems, Columbia should take off from the Kennedy Space Center tomorrow at about lunchtime our time. It should land at Edwards Air Force Base on Monday. The 4 astronauts are already at the launch site.
We're tickled to be here, and we hope we put on a good show for you Thursday morning at 7:19.
Colonel Robert Overmeyer will fly Columbia along with Mission Commander Vance Brand. The others, William Lenore and Joseph Allen, will be in charge of the shuttle's cargo, 2 commercial satellites. Our space editor, Reg Turnell, is at launch control at the Kennedy Space Center at this moment, and I hope he's on the telephone. Hello, Reg.
Yes, Tom.
Well, Reg, there have been last-minute delays before with Columbia. Everything going right this time?
Everything's fine. The only trouble is the launch window lasts for only 40 minutes this time, and they really need to get Columbia up within the first 6 minutes.
And what's going to be different about the mission this time?
It's carrying the first paying passengers in the form of 2 satellites. 8 hours after launch, the first satellite, they start spinning like a record on a turntable. And that's to keep it steady in space when the time comes to push it out by releasing 3 springs. And as it drifts slowly away from Columbia, it's set like an alarm clock. And the engine should fire exactly 45 minutes later to take it up to the right height for carrying America's TV programs, etc. If that engine doesn't fire, it'll have to be abandoned. For Columbia to go and see why would be like a boy picking up an unexploded firework. And the biggest excitement on the 4th day is America's first spacewalk for 9 years. The 2 astronauts will be trying out new space tools for fixing Columbia if the doors get jammed, and for going out and repairing broken down satellites.
And what will conditions be like on board Columbia? Because this time, of course, there are 4 astronauts instead of just 2.
Very cramped indeed, John. Everything from toothbrushes to food packets is coloured, so they know who it belongs to. But the biggest worry is Columbia's toilet. It's never worked properly yet, and if it goes wrong again with 4 people aboard, they'll be in real trouble.
Well, let's hope it does work this time, Reg. And I hope to speak to you about the same time tomorrow, reporting a successful launch.
Right, John, it's a very complicated launch, and it'll be amazing if something doesn't go wrong, but we're all keeping our fingers crossed. Cheers for now.
The 5th flight of the American space shuttle Columbia got off to a smooth start today. The launch, the most complex so far, went very smoothly. For the first time, computers were in complete control of the countdown from 9 minutes before takeoff.
We are go for main engine ignition.
7,
6. We have main engine ignition. 3, 2, 1, and solid motor ignition and liftoff. Liftoff of the first operational space shuttle mission with 2 satellites on board, and the shuttle has cleared the tower.
55 seconds. Columbia now 4.5 nautical miles in altitude. Mark 1 minute. Pass through max Q. Still looking good. Standing by now for solid rocket booster separation confirmation.
Roger, PC.
2 minutes, 15 seconds. Confirm solid rocket booster separation.
Well, Newsround space editor Reg Turnell is at launch control, and hopefully he's on the line now. Hello, Reg.
Hello, John.
Is everything still going well?
So far, so good. Joe Allen, the comic of the crew, has been moving around in bare feet using his toes and saying it's just like having 4 hands. And Columbia has just passed about 80 kilometers from Russia's Salyut 7. That's had 2 men aboard for 6 months, but we don't know yet whether they managed to see each other.
Well, what's happening next, Reg?
Well, they've just asked for a private medical conference, so 1 or 2 might be getting space sick. But apart from that, everything's perfect for popping out the first satellite in 3 hours' time.
Reg, thank you very much indeed. Bye-bye. In a packed house...
time, on board, the veteran astronaut Vance Brand commands a crew of 4. The first time a spacecraft has carried so many astronauts. The shuttle is also chalking up another first, as Jane Corbin reports.
Columbia's cargo is what makes this 5th mission different from previous flights. 2 communications satellites, the first commercial payload. It's costing nearly $20 million between them for the ride. 4 astronauts are manning this flight instead of the normal 2. They'll be wearing new spacesuits, which they'll test on Sunday in a spacewalk.
6. We have main engine ignition. 3, 2, 1, and solid motor ignition and liftoff. Liftoff of the first operational space shuttle mission with 2 satellites on board, and the shuttle has cleared the tower.
Liftoff went according to plan, and Columbia is now on her way to an orbit 185 miles above the Earth's surface. In about half an hour's time, the shuttle's payload doors will slide open, ready to eject Satellite Business Systems communication craft. The shuttle crew will then command spinning of the satellite like a gyroscope to provide the necessary stability once the satellite leaves the shuttle bay. It will then be ejected by 4 simple springs into the weightlessness of space and fire its booster rockets to take it to its final position 22,000 miles above the Earth. The second satellite, Anik C, will follow tomorrow, and between them these 2 satellites will provide business and TV communications for America and Canada.
Shuttle is back in space for the 5th time. She had a smooth launch and is now well established into her 5-day mission. Aerospace correspondent Christopher Wayne watched the launch.
We are go for main engine ignition.
Columbia blasted off right on time at exactly 19 minutes past the hour. Unlike the previous 4 proving flights, this was a proper commercial operation. Instead of 2 test pilots, there was a full crew of 4 astronauts, including a physicist and an engineer. And in the cargo hold, there were 2 communication satellites, 1 American, 1 Canadian, to be put into orbit round the Earth. So this 5-day mission is intended to prove that Columbia can do the job she was designed for, and that the United States has got value for the £6 billion so far spent on the shuttle program. The latest pictures we've received show the cargo doors of the shuttle open as the Columbia moves into a perpendicular position. The first of the 2 satellites is being released at the moment. Once it's clear of the shuttle, it'll be boosted by rocket into a geostationary orbit. This mission will last 5 days. Columbia is due to return to Earth on Tuesday afternoon.
After only a few hours in space, the Americans passed the orbiting Russian space station Salyut-7. The 2-man Russian crew was launched into space in April. On Sunday, they break the previous endurance record of 185 days in space. They haven't been all alone that time. There have been visits from the French and fellow cosmonauts, but they're on their own now, apart from passing traffic.
This time on her first commercial flight to put satellites into orbit. This was how liftoff happened at 19 minutes past 12 today.
10, we are go for main engine ignition. 6, we have main engine ignition. 3, 2, 1, and solid motor ignition and liftoff. Liftoff of the first operational space shuttle mission with 2 satellites on board, and the shuttle has cleared the tower.
For this commercial mission, Columbia has a full crew of 4 astronauts, including a physicist and an engineer. The 2 satellites for release into orbit were tucked away in her cargo compartment. The 5-day mission is designed to prove that Columbia can do what she was built to do and recoup some of the $6 billion it's cost to produce her. The 2 scientists on board will do a 2-hour spacewalk. Touchdown is due next Tuesday afternoon. China.
The crew of the American space shuttle, Columbia, are making final preparations to place a second commercial satellite into permanent orbit later this evening. The first one is already heading for orbit more than 22,000 miles above the Earth. Its perfect launch started a new era in space.
Roger, we copy that. But right now it looks good, and there was a short period of time where...
Safely into orbit. A computer starts its spinning prior to launch to provide stability. Inside, mission specialist Joe Allen keeps a watchful eye on the cargo to see the deal goes through without a hitch. Explosive bolts are fired, releasing springs which literally catapult the satellite out of the hold. Then its own onboard rocket takes it up to a geostationary orbit 22,000 miles above the Earth. The second satellite is due for launch later tonight. For NASA's competitors in this multi-million-pound market, the message is clear. We can deliver.
Commercial frontiers. But first, that it's part of the £5,000 million project marking the beginning of the commercial use of space travel. That becomes a reality in just over an hour's time when the shuttle puts its second satellite into orbit. It's the Canadian satellite, and it's called Anik. Here's Jane Corbin.
If Anik C follows the smooth pattern set by SBS's satellite last night, there'll be a party back at Mission Control in Houston. For Columbia will have proved that she is capable of doing what she was designed to do, provide a guaranteed and relatively cheap way of putting satellites into space. And some of the $10 million cost will have been justified. NASA claims the shuttle will make the commercial exploration of space a reality.
6. We have main engine ignition. 3, 2, 1, and solid motor ignition and liftoff. Liftoff of the first operational space shuttle mission with 2 satellites on board, and the shuttle has cleared the tower.
The first satellite launch came exactly 8 hours after Columbia's own liftoff from Cape Kennedy. Joseph Allen, one of the 4 scientists on the mission, successfully launched the SBS satellite last night. He commanded spinning of the satellite like a gyroscope to provide the necessary stability once the satellite left the craft. Then SBS was ejected by springs. Later it fired its booster rockets to take it to its final destination, 22,300 miles above the Earth. The 2 satellites between them will provide business and TV communications for America and Canada. IBM is the major partner in the consortium that built the SBS satellite. They see it as their way into the lucrative long-distance phone call market, dominated at present by AT&T, America's giant telecommunications company. Allen and Lenoir plan a spacewalk on Sunday outside the shuttle, wearing spacesuits with a built-in power pack. This walk is crucial to NASA's aim to prove that the shuttle is a flexible craft, and astronauts will be able to repair satellites from Columbia. The race for space is on because Columbia is not the only launcher touting for satellite business. The European Space Agency's launcher, Ariane, which has made 3 successful missions, is Columbia's main competitor. France and Germany are the major shareholders, but Britain has a 2.4% share. Lawrence McGinty assesses the claims of the rivals.
The American Space Agency is charging £12 million for launching the 2 communication satellites on the shuttle now in orbit. It will cost nearly £10 million to launch a satellite on the shuttle and another £3 or £4 million for the booster to lift the satellite into high orbit around the Earth. But lots of people are willing to pay the price. By 1987, the shuttle should have carried into space 7 payloads for the US Air Force and 18 other secret military payloads. Scientific and commercial cargoes will bring the total number of shuttle flights to 70. The shuttle's rival, Europe's Ariane rocket, is by comparison old-fashioned. It's a conventional one-shot rocket. Because Ariane is not reusable, it should cost more to use to launch satellites. But Ariane has one advantage over the shuttle. It can carry satellites directly to the high orbits over the Earth where their operators want them to be. That makes the cost of launching rockets on Ariane and shuttle roughly the same. However, confidence in Ariane is not very high after its disastrous flight in September when it plunged into the Atlantic Ocean, taking 2 satellites worth more than £30 million with it. Nevertheless, Arianespace, the company that operates Ariane, has a healthy order book. It has 30 firm orders for satellite launches and provisional bookings for another 15 launches. It is also negotiating with customers for launches on a more powerful version of its rocket. That could mean another 15 launches. The shuttle can launch satellites, and all eyes will now be on Ariane's next attempt to put satellites into space in April.
Back here on Earth, the businessmen are planning their participation in and profits from the space race. British companies like Marconi Space and Defence Systems are busy working on the specialist electronics which fit inside the satellite shell and provide its specific function, whether TV or defence communications. They've made future bookings on both Ariane and the shuttle.
Everybody wants to talk to everybody else much more than they used to. You know that with your own telephone bill. But added to that, across the Atlantic recently, telephone traffic has increased by 25% per annum. And now computers are being introduced, and they want to talk to each other. You want to pass television programs back and forth across the Atlantic. And that's just between the Western developed countries. All the less developed countries are getting a taste for it. They want to introduce it too.
There are at present 2 launches to actually put your product into space. There's NASA's shuttle and the Europeans' Ariane. Is that competition good for commercial companies like Marconi?
Yes, it's very good indeed, because it certainly must help to keep the price down. What the true price for launching either satellites by shuttle or Ariane is, I don't think anybody really knows at the moment, because they're competing so hard. Both systems have their advantage, but officially the shuttle should be cheaper, but it has the disadvantage that you have very much more safety considerations to take into account, because you might have to bring the satellite back unlaunched. And also you have to put another rocket on the satellite to get it up to full height for using it for communication purposes.
But overall, you think that competition is healthy?
Oh, it's very healthy, yes.
NASA hope the shuttle will go on to achieve other firsts in the commercial exploration of space. I asked Dr. Tom Paine, the ex-head of NASA, how he saw Columbia's future.
Well, the space shuttle is the first step towards the reusable space transportation system. And the next project that NASA has its dreamers working on is to put a permanent space station up, in which case the space shuttle will be the back and forth routine travel. So no matter how you slice it, the space shuttle is here to stay, and improved ones will come in the future, but this is a very important first step.
How big could shuttle be commercially?
Well, I would expect to see a number of missions carried out every month as we bring the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th orbiter on, and then there's discussion of a 5th orbiter. And as we learn to shorten the turnaround times down at Cape Kennedy between missions, we'll be able to carry an enormous amount of cargo up.
The Europeans, of course, have got Ariane. The shuttle may never break even. Doesn't the commercial competition worry you?
Well, I personally welcome the competition. I think it's wonderful that the Europeans have their own approach to it. I think that as far as the competitions go, you have to remember that there's more to the shuttle than just taking a payload up, or even the fact that we can now bring a payload down. It also drastically changes the way we design the payloads. We're designing them now to be refurbished, to be tended by the shuttle. We can put film packs in one mission and take them out in another. We can put whole colonies of satellites free-flying up and then visit them in future shuttle missions. So it's really as important in the new things we can do in the payloads as it is in the fact that it's a low-cost transportation
And
device.
you're convinced it's going to make money?
Well, we're going to charge enough money so that no matter how much the costs go up, we're going to get that amount from anybody that wants to launch.
Optimistic words from Dr. Paine, but military and government projects are more likely to balance the shuttle's books for NASA. Only time and more successful launches will tell whether Ariane or Columbia will make the real money in space.
And the main...
And we apparently got very good TV and photo documentation.
The man Columbia has successfully delivered 2 satellites into orbit. The launches were the kind of commercial task on which the shuttle's future depends.
Yeah, we see it down here, Bill. It's beautiful.
Looks like they got a beautiful day in the Hawaiian Islands today, Mike.
It all went perfectly, and the Americans were jubilant.
And there was a short period of time where it did go out on us, but it's back. And we apparently got very good TV and photo documentation of it. Over.
The United States said today's mission puts the shuttle well ahead of its rivals in the race to put more satellites into space.
Has fulfilled its first contract in space by sending into orbit a 2nd communication satellite. The first is already orbiting the Earth 23,000 miles up. The 2nd was sent early this evening to join it. The 4-man crew said today everything was operating perfectly. This report from David Chater.
What you're seeing is no simulation, but the actual satellite sitting in a cradle in the shuttle's cargo bay. The space agency was paid nearly £10 million to launch this and its companion into orbit. A computer starts its spinning prior to launch to provide stability. Inside, mission specialist Joe Allen keeps a watchful eye on the cargo to see the deal goes through without a hitch. Explosive bolts are fired, releasing springs which literally catapult the satellite out of the hold. Strung beneath it, its own onboard rocket motor. It's an entirely new technique, but one which NASA had to prove would work. The successful launch of the 2nd satellite less than 2 hours ago proves that it does. The particles you're about to see are splinters from the cargo bay produced by the launch. The flash is sunlight reflecting in the satellite's solar cells. When the shuttle has pulled far enough away from the satellite, a distance of more than 20 miles, the signal is sent to fire its own motor. It then accelerates rapidly away, as seen in this simulation, to climb into a geostationary orbit 22,300 miles above the Earth. For NASA's competitors in the multi-million-pound satellite business, the message is clear. We can deliver.
There was the postponement of a spacewalk planned for tomorrow. The four-man crew have already launched a second space satellite, so completing the commercial part of the mission. Before the launch, there was time to enjoy the breathtaking view, and with it, some classical music they took into space with them. Just as they orbited above the equator, they launched the satellite. There was music there.
Preparations for a 3.5-hour spacewalk tomorrow morning. It's the last major task for the shuttle, which has already launched 2 communications satellites into orbit. Columbia's been sending back some spectacular views of Earth.
At the end of the maneuver, it seemed like we were headed about 60 degrees up.
There's been time for some less serious experimenting and a little music to go with it.
Roger, we can.
Then came the launch of the second satellite from Columbia's cargo bay.
4, 3, 2.
Stand the 10 minutes, Blue Peter. First, it's John Craven's News Round.
Disappointment for the shuttle astronauts as the spacewalk is cancelled. Hello again. The spacewalk from the American space shuttle Columbia, which was planned for lunchtime today, has had to be cancelled. It's because of a problem with the astronauts' special spacesuits. The walk had originally been planned for Sunday, but it was postponed when one of the astronauts, William Lenore, complained of space sickness. It was hoped he and Joe Allen will be able to go ahead today. But when preparations started this morning, it became clear that both the million-dollar suits were faulty. Lenore and Allen were to have left the shuttle to work in Columbia's empty cargo bay for about 3.5 hours. It was to have been the first American spacewalk for 9 years, and its cancellation is the first big disappointment of this mission. Well, Newsround's space editor, Reg Turnill, has been following the mission from the Kennedy Space Center, and I hope he's on the line right now. Hello, Reg. Reg, it must be a big disappointment.
Oh, yes, the failure of both suits was a big shock here. Allen and Lenore had spent 4 hours in the tiny airlock struggling to make them work, but first it was the oxygen fan in Allen's suit, then the pressure regulator in Lenore's that failed, and unable to breathe properly, they finally had to give up and take the suits off.
But they did have some problems, didn't they, when they were developing these special suits?
No, they did have a lot of problems then, and although they cost £500,000 each, the suits gave lots of trouble during water tank tests at mission control. But Lenore hoped they'd work better in space. With Allen, he spent hours practicing underwater. They're supposed to be so flexible they can touch their toes or pick up a match. And the big job today was to have been trying out new tools for repairing a £70 million spacecraft which broke down 2 years ago. At the moment, Lenore is in the airlock again, making one last attempt to get the suit to work. For if Columbia's doors get stuck before tomorrow's re-entry, Lenore will have to go out alone in a faulty suit to try and shut them in a last bid to save the lives of all 4 crewmen.
Well, let's hope everything does go well tomorrow, Reg, and I look forward to talking to you at the same time tomorrow about a safe landing for Columbia. Thank you, Reg. Bye. The funeral took
because the astronauts' new million-pound spacesuits turned out to be faulty. 2 astronauts should have ventured into space to test their new self-contained suits, but they found faults they couldn't repair on the spot. But NASA is not too disappointed. It says the most important part of the mission was to launch 2 communication satellites. The shuttle's crew completed that task on Saturday.
To go for a walk in space today, but they couldn't. Their spacesuits, each costing more than £1 million, were faulty. It's the first big setback for the Space Shuttle's mission, which is due to end tomorrow.
The suits, which months ago had been immersed in water to simulate weightlessness, have had a history of development problems, problems which have inflated the price of a NASA contract for 43 of them from $47 million to $107 million. Today's planned dual spacewalk was to have been their first real test and the mission's last major objective. One of the 2 scientists aboard Columbia was to have walked the length of the 60-foot cargo bay during a 3-hour test. Instead, they played around with gyroscopes and a model of a satellite, while Mission Control pondered whether there should be another attempt tomorrow. But that's unlikely, and so tomorrow's return to Earth for a California homecoming won't be completely triumphant.
Looks like we just came over Bahamas, tongue of the ocean, and the eastern tip of Cuba. Now, if you like, what we'll do is we'll give you a view of our payload bay.
11 plans for America's first walk in space for 9 years. Joe Allen found that the fan which pumps oxygen round his suit wasn't working properly. William Lenoir had pressure trouble with his suit. The shuttle is due to return to Earth as planned tomorrow lunchtime. In place of the spacewalk, the astronauts joined in a televised demonstration of weightlessness in Columbia's cabin. Joe Allen sent 2 gyroscopes spinning off into the zero gravity. Pilot Robert Overmeyer came up with his version of a close shave and showed how adept he'd become at grabbing objects that just float away when you put them down. Then, passing over Florida and the Caribbean, they trained their cameras on yet another spectacular view of Mother Earth. And this view from another camera was the closest they got to what should have been 3 hours of work in the open cargo hold. As Mission Control put it, no celebration cigars this time.
Today was called off after the astronauts discovered problems with both the new style spacesuits. The next scheduled spacewalk from a shuttle isn't supposed to be until 1984 on the 13th mission. But it's likely that one of the next few missions, this is only the 5th, will be reorganized to accommodate the cancelled walk.
It's camera in action for another screen test in just over 5 minutes. That's after John Craven's News Round.
Back to Earth, a safe journey home for the space shuttle. The American space shuttle touched down this afternoon at the end of its 5th mission and its first commercial flight. Columbia and her 4 astronauts managed an almost perfect landing after 5 days in space. They'd orbited the Earth 82 times. Conditions were cloudy but good at Edwards Air Force Base in California as Columbia appeared just after dawn. As it glided in to land, the spacecraft seemed to turn to gold in the glow of the early morning sun.
Gear down. Show the gear lock now.
Mission Commander Vance Brand at the controls brought her down smoothly onto a concrete runway.
Unofficial touchdown time was 5 days, 2 hours, 14 minutes, 25 seconds.
Newsround space editor Reg Turnhill watched the landing from Kennedy Space Center, and he's on the phone now. Hello, Reg. How does NASA feel that this mission has gone?
Well, very happy about deploying the first 2 satellites, John, and in fact the 4 astronauts are just appearing on closed-circuit TV here. And, of course, they were very happy about that marvelous short landing. The crew were testing the brakes to see how quickly Columbia could stop in an emergency. But space sickness is still a big worry. 6 out of 12 men on 5 flights. But they insist it's really no worse than seasickness.
Well, Columbia's safely down now, Reg. What's the news about the next flight?
Well, that'll be done by Challenger, which is a much lighter and more advanced space shuttle than Columbia, and that should be at the end of January next. At present, it has a crew of 4, but they're so disappointed about having lost the spacewalk that they're thinking of sending Joe Allen and Bill Lenore up on the next flight to give them a second chance to do that spacewalk.
Well, Reg, thanks very much indeed for all your reports about the mission. Bye for now.
Columbia does it again, the perfect end to another space first.
2 hours in orbit. The 4 astronauts aboard have suffered mixed fortunes. A spacewalk was first postponed because one of the astronauts, William Lenoir, was space sick and then cancelled when the astronauts' new spacesuits proved faulty. But the shuttle did successfully launch 2 communications satellites, proving that it can deliver the goods. On balance, NASA is pleased with the flight.
Roy, are we down now? Are we underground?
Absolutely. It was beautiful, and you certainly lived up to your motto this flight. Welcome home.
Yes, sir. We deliver.
In Moscow.
They're calling it a success in Houston, but as our air correspondent Christopher Wayne reports, they'll want to know what went wrong with those $2 million spacesuits.
289 knots.
When this mission was first planned, it was intended to have a fully automatic landing, but then it was decided it would be better to leave a test pilot in control.
Locked now.
The touchdown was flawless.
Unofficial touchdown time was 5 days, 2 hours, 14 minutes, 25 seconds.
The main purpose of the flight, launching 2 commercial satellites into orbit from the cargo hold, was achieved. So, as a commercial venture, Mission 5 was a success. But 2 problems did occur. The first was space sickness. It hit 2 of Columbia's 4-man crew and caused the cancellation of the spacewalk on Sunday. NASA doctors just don't know enough about space sickness to treat it. Their worry is that if an astronaut were to suffer an acute attack while working outside the shuttle, it could be fatal. The other problem was that the multi-million-pound space suits of astronauts Bill Lenore and Joe Allen both developed faults. Yesterday, these caused the spacewalk to be called off. So far, the shuttle program has cost NASA about £6 billion. The first 4 missions were simply test flights. This month has seen the first commercial flight, and next year the first 3 missions by a new shuttle, Challenger, will carry satellites for Indonesia, Canada, Germany and India. Those launches are planned for January, April and July. In September, Columbia will launch the European Space Lab, and in November, Challenger will take up the first secret military payload. The Soviet Union has ignored shuttle technology and concentrated on keeping astronauts in orbiting space laboratories for months at a time. On Sunday, Russian astronauts broke the space endurance record.
American space officials gave details today of how a Soviet satellite helped them find a crashed aircraft that nobody on the ground even knew about. And it had happened only a quarter of a mile from the end of a runway, killing 8 people. The Americans say the twin-engined aircraft crashed into a forest in rain and darkness just after takeoff from the Blue Ridge in Virginia. Nobody noticed the crash, but the Russian satellite picked up an emergency radio signal, which was passed on to Scott Air Force Base in Illinois. They told Blue Ridge, and a rescue team went out and found the wreckage. The former Liberal
landing in California after its 5-day flight. Columbia launched 2 commercial satellites, establishing the spacecraft for the first time as a cargo-carrying moneymaker. David Chater reports on the shuttle's return to Earth.
Caught on a camera from a spotter plane, this is the moment that Columbia turns from a spacecraft into what the astronauts call a flying brick. Blazing down from an orbital speed of more than 17,000 miles an hour, pilot Robert Overmyer had to fight the force of gravity to slow it to just under 200 miles an hour. Now on its 5th flight, and with more than 10 million miles clocked up on its mileometer, Columbia touched down on the Californian desert 8 minutes after sunrise, and some 30 seconds early. It was a performance that put into the shade the minor problems they had on the mission, and even left them time for a few jokes with mission control.
Hey,
Absolutely. It was beautiful, and you certainly lived up to your motto this flight. Welcome home. Yes, sir. We deliver.
Columbia will now get a well-earned rest until next September, when it will carry Europe's space lab into orbit. Its sister ship, Challenger, will be next into space. The crew, led by Commander Vance Brand, said it had been a fantastic voyage. But NASA admitted that the problem of space sickness still needs a lot more research before the 5 shuttle missions planned for next year.